So I'm going to start by introducing the work and our esteemed speakers. So this research, which is funded by the JABS Foundation for Women and Girls, explores what a better system of substance use treatment and support would look like from the perspective of women in treatment. And so for this research, we worked with the Nelson Trust, who kindly let us into their women's centres across the southwest of England and facilitated our access to speaking with women. And they also recruited the peer researcher for this project, so Suraksha Eugene Wall, who you will be hearing from a bit later. This is the third publication in this programme of research. So last year we published a guide to commissioning drug and alcohol treatment services for women that highlighted practical ways of improving women's access to and experience of gender responsive treatment services, which was also funded by the JABS Foundation. And this built on prior research by the centre funded by the JABS Foundation and the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner, which found evidence that women were accessing treatment services in spaces that exposed them to risks of abuse or exploitation, and that did not give them space to explore their gendered experiences or effectively meet their needs if they had experienced trauma. So this report builds on our previous findings by evidencing the key elements women with experience of treatment perceive as effective treatment and their views on how the treatment should link with wider systems of support. Through practitioner engagement and a review of existing literature, this report also shares examples of good practice in supporting women in holistic, integrated, gender and trauma responsive ways. So for today's seminar, we are very privileged to have 5 excellent speakers who will speak for roughly 10 minutes each, leaving time for Q&A at the end. So firstly, and I'll introduce those speakers to you now before we start. So firstly, we are delighted to be joined by Dame Carol Black. In 2019, Professor Dame Carol was commissioned by the Home Office and the Department of Health and Social Care to undertake a 2-part independent review of drugs. Part 1 provided a detailed analysis of the challenges posed by drug supply and demand, and Part 2 focused on drug treatment, recovery and prevention. Since her reviews, Dame Carol continues to lend her expertise, acting as an independent advisor to review the government's progress in this work, and she will be sharing a bit about this today, as well as looking forward at what's next. Next, we will hear from Lydia Clark. Lydia is a senior researcher here at the centre and was the lead researcher on this project. Lydia is going to share findings from the research and recommendations for practical steps towards a more integrated and effective system. Then we are going to hear from Suraksha, the peer researcher on this project, who will share some of her reflections from the research and highlight the importance of relapse and ongoing recovery support. This will be followed by Christina Line, who is CEO of the Nelson Trust, who are our partners for this piece of work. And Chris is going to give an overview of the work that they do with women and the role that women's centres have in not only treatment provision for women, but their role within a whole system approach. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we'll hear from Emma Plant. And Emma has set up Connected Spaces under Red Rose Recovery, which provides a collective voice for the recovery community in North Yorkshire. And Emma's going to share a bit about her experience, how this led her to Connected Spaces and the work that they do. And then at the end, we'll open up to the Q&A. But again, please do submit questions throughout the event on the Q&A function, and you can find that in a tab at the top. So yeah, please do send those in ready for the Q&A session at the end. So we hope you enjoy. Lots to get through. So I am going to hand straight over to Dame Carol Black to get us started.
Is that visible?
Yes, it is.
Good.
Carol.
I've managed it. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to be with you for this whole morning event. And what I'm going to try and do is give you a very honest appraisal of where we are and the challenges that we face. Now, I don't seem to be able to move my slides on. Dear me. I'm sharing the screen. Let's see. Okay. found the way of doing it. I just want to remind you of what I recommended. What I found was a completely broken system. And it was a system that was demoralized and almost destroyed. I mean, I think it would not be too much to say almost all we had left was really the giving of methadone as a substitution therapy for heroin addiction, but we had nothing that resembled a whole systems approach. What I recommended to the government, as you will all know, I think, was that we had a whole systems change. All those little squares there represent the things I asked and recommended in my review should be in there. And of course, it covered housing, mental health and trauma, peer support, clear accountability, research and innovation. And it also spoke to the fact that we did not have a proper central system, a process, a department, a unit. We didn't have a minister for drugs. And we didn't have locally anything that resembled a proper system to try and deliver much better care. So they were the building blocks of what I asked for. And of course, there had to be additional investment. There had been no investment since 2013 in drug and alcohol treatment and recovery. Indeed, quite the opposite, because the public health grant had been regularly every year reduced. And of course, if the public health grant was reduced, the thing that got cut from the public health delivery was drugs and alcohol treatment. We did get a little bit of money just after I wrote the review. We got 80 million to tide us over to the spending review. And then, as you will all know, my review resulted in From Harm to Hope, a 10-year ambition by the last government, broken into 3 parts with money going to each bit of it, in total about 780 million new money over the 3 years. That period ending, of course, April 2025, the period of the spending review. And that money was to improve our break up our drug supply chain, deliver a world-class treatment and recovery system, and then to start to generate a shift in demand and to think about prevention. And there was money allocated to each of those. It was a mountain to climb. I had really and have underestimated what it would take to change the system. You can see the outcomes that the government set us on this slide. We have met some of them, but it has been impossible to meet some of the others, because really from where we started, and absolutely essential, so I put it in red, is that money has to be ring fenced, because if you don't ring fence money and you just put it into the public health grant, I fear that local councils, because of the demands on their resources and on their what they can do, will use it for other very needy things. But we need the money ring fenced to this. I can make no apology. I realize entirely that thinking of the needs of the groups that talked to me during my research, so the needs of women, the needs of the LGBT plus community, the needs of different ethnic minorities who spoke to me about the inappropriate treatment they received, not taking into account their cultural needs, their religious needs. I am very, very well aware that we are nowhere near to delivering what I would call a proper service for all of the people who deserve special attention. Our first 3 years has been spent entirely trying to set up a service that was destroyed and to try and get a workforce into it. So here are some of the progress that I think we've made on my recommendations. By the way, not all my recommendations have been enacted yet. And there's one or two actually that still need real attention. I mentioned we absolutely had to have new structures. We had to have an outcomes framework. We had to have standards for commissioning. We had to set up a joint central drugs unit. We needed a minister. We needed a senior responsible officer, etc. All that takes time, of course. We have seen an increased number of county lines disrupted, which of course is a good thing. But of course, there have been many other ways that drugs have come into the country other than through what we know as county lines. Increased drug testing on arrest with the hope that it will enable people not necessarily to have to go down the criminal justice system. Diversion from the criminal justice system is essential. Too many people go to prison who really, prison has nothing to offer them which will help them recover. Referrals for assessment have been improving, and we have seen an improvement in continuity of care after prison, but nowhere near enough. We have seen increased numbers of people in treatment, mainly for alcohol, crack, powder cocaine, cannabis, and other drugs. What we have not seen, which has been very disappointing to me, is the right increase in the number of people who are dependent on heroin. Often these people are the most needy in the most complex and difficult situations, and we have failed to reach the numbers required of us, and there are multiple reasons for that. I have highlighted two things, which I'll just highlight again in a moment. We have seen at last a developing and supportive recovery communities. I couldn't really find any living recovery communities that were flourishing when I did my review because of the lack of support. They had to close down most of what they did, and we have seen improvement there, and I'll just show you some of that. We've seen an increased number of drug-dependent rough sleepers helped. We've worked very closely with the Department of Housing and especially working with their rough sleeping program. One of the best things that I've seen, people told me that you could never get drug-dependent people into sustainable work. That is rubbish. And we have seen through the IPS program, individual placements and support, that now every area of the country, of England, is covered by an IPS program. And we are seeing really, really encouraging changes in the number of people who are part of the IPS program and find sustainable work. We managed to secure about 30 million for research. The National Institute for Health Research Programme and Innovation Fund is happening. Of course, it's too early to know the result. And I was allowed, although prisons were excluded from my original review, that review has now taken place as an internal review for ministers. It's now in the public domain because I presented it to the Justice Select Committee, which therefore put it into the public domain. So this is very quick and I haven't got much time, but we have now, through the hard work of Ed Day, our recovery champion, and people in OHID working with LEROs, we have now got a program of guidance, which is about peer support and lived experience initiatives. It looks at the evidence and current provision. It explains how to develop systems of care that support recovery. And I've been to visit some really excellent recovery services now. At last, it's beginning to happen. It's patchy around the country, but the recovery support services as part of that continuum of care is now available and has got excellent advice in it. We've got clearer masterclasses, we've got groups, we've got standards. So I just very quickly wanted you to realise that although it's not been easy and it certainly isn't perfect, we are beginning to see the growth from the ground up of proper recovery. And then the other one, as I said, I'm particularly pleased of the outcomes after the initial trial of IPS. So just to orientate you, in blue, you will see the results from the trial that came from another piece of work I did for government, which was a 7-centred controlled trial between 2018 and 21. And you see the results of that in blue. Those results were encouraging. They weren't as good as I would have wished them to be, but they were certainly moving in the right direction. And DWP, much, I think, to be thanked for this, didn't say, well, no, it's not, doesn't reach statistical significance, so we're not going to continue support you. Did support us as we did the review and have provided resources for IPS to be now in every area. And you can see in turquoise that we have improved. We've learned from those early trials. We now have a much better rate of job start rate. The days to the first job have gone down from 179 to 144. Job sustainability has improved, and the number of people in employment at 18 months of follow-up. And we now actually meet DWP's standard for return on investment for anything that they invest in. So that is indeed good news. So where is it not so good? And we have to be quite honest about this because, as I say, there is a mountain to climb. It was a 10-year project. To deliver the From Harm to Hope. We've only so far had 3 years of money. We do not know what the spending review will do to us, but we absolutely need continuing support. We can do much better with greater coordination between central departments and local partners. We've realised that as our 3 years have developed. We now know as far as county lines are closed, we close them, but markets adapt, and you will all be aware of the increase in online sales. We've seen increased rates of diversion from custody, but it isn't equal across the country. Police forces do different things, and there is quite a lot of work going on, and indeed some very good research work to try and see which is the best way, what works best with diversion, and how might we try and get it to a more national programme rather piecemeal. And we've seen continued improvement in continuity of care. When I started the review, it was about 36%. The average now is in the 50s, and the very, very good areas of the country, and there are one or two, are up to 70%. I've put in red the things that I'm really not happy about at all. So we are trying as hard as we can to improve mental health services. As you know, mental health delivered by the NHS, local authorities delivering drug and recovery services. There's been some traditional views on both sides. We are doing our very best to try and bring them together to make sure that there is much closer working, and that the treatment services can deliver some of the simple mental health interventions, and that those who work in mental health understand much better the addiction service and can start to think proactively about how they help people who've got mental health and drug dependency problems, and there are a lot of those. I saw virtually no delivery of trauma care. I saw trauma-informed words used. That is quite different from offering somebody services to help their trauma. We've got a mountain to climb in improving workforce skills and widening the skill mix. What we have seen is many more people in our workforce. And I do have, if anybody wants all the numbers, I've got them here. I won't waste time by giving them now. But what we have not seen is a suitable improvement in quality, because there's so few people out there with the right skills that we can employ, that we have got the job of really training to build up that workforce. This is not a quick, easy fix at all. The workforce document has now just been published by DH and NHS England. But improving those skills, we know, is very much the next thing that we want to do in the year ahead. recovery communities, we've still got a long way to go on housing, and very much we need to stop the almost postcode lottery for long-acting buprenorphine. And one of my recommendations, which has not yet really been really fully looked at all, is improving physical health, or the physical problems that drug-dependent individuals try to cope with. And then very much I want to see a much better link up between the prison community drug treatment and recovery services. They're part of the same ecosystem. If you do it well in the community, far less people go to prison. And if you can get it better in the prison, then you've got far more chance of people coming out of prison seeking to maintain a relationship with recovery and with the treatment service. So here, this is what I said about mental health and drug dependency in my 2021 report. I still would maintain that services remain inadequate in almost every region of the country. This is just, I borrowed this slide from Health Watch. This was, I heard it presented at a conference I was lecturing at a few weeks ago. And it's 38 pieces of feedback relating to substance misuse and access to mental health services, a year's study. And you can see that 71% of the survey results were negative, with really a very low amount of positivity. So let us be honest about where we are about mental health. Workforce framework, as I say, we just have so much to do here, published in March, but it does support the development of a multidisciplinary workforce. It aims over the years to get this into practice, and commissioners and service providers now should use this framework to ensure that their workforce has the required skills, knowledge, etc., to enable services to be delivered to anyone who needs them. And then, as I say, I have a great interest in and desire to see the prisons and communities become much better linked as systems, because they interact so closely with each other, even though most people tend to think very little about prisons, even when they're working in community drug and treatment and alcohol services. We need to fit this into the new government's missions. We think we can do that pretty well. After all, we fit very well into safer streets. We fit very well into the NHS, and the need to do it better in our treatment and recovery so that there is less demand on the NHS. I've just shown you that we can add something to the economic mission, and I think that is wonderful. And we obviously fit into the barriers to opportunity, because we're deeply interested in children and young people and supporting them both in a preventative and treatment manner. So really, that's what I know it's a very rapid whiz through, but I hope it gives you a feeling of where we are, the good, the not so good, but the need to keep going, to keep trying to improve our services, and of course to start to offer much more specialised services to any group, including women, who need what I know in many areas we don't provide, although I do and have visited some very good services for women around the country. Thank you.
Dame Carol, that was excellent. Thank you so much. That was a really really helpful overview of everything. And as I'd said before, we're incredibly privileged to be able to have you here today at this event as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass over now to Lydia Clark, who is our senior researcher, and she's going to talk specifically about this project that that she's been working on. So thanks, Lydia.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. Can everyone see my screen? I can't see if that's up.
We can.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining today. It's been an absolute privilege being able to do this research, and I've really valued being able to speak with the women and hear from them about what it is that they want and what they think is effective treatment. And today I get to share that all with you. So I'm going to start by giving a quick overview of the project, and then I'll share the findings with you, looking at what treatment and recovery mean for women, how they want to move through treatment, and how they think effective treatment should be delivered. And then we'll look at how whole systems approaches present a promising alternative to standalone treatment services, and one that reflects what it was the women kind of perceived as effective. And lastly, we're going to go over what we're recommending that central government, local authorities and service providers can do to improve women's access to gender and trauma responsive treatment and support. Oh, yeah. So our previous report explored women's experiences of treatment in the West Midlands. And it found that often standalone mixed-gendered treatment services, were not working for women. So this report sought to build on that by exploring what effective treatment practice looks like from the perspectives of women who have experience of both mixed-gendered and gender-responsive treatment services. And then through practitioner engagement and a review of existing literature, this report also shares some examples of good practice, highlighting how to support women in holistic, integrated, gender and trauma-responsive ways. I'm not going to go into the full methodology now, just in the interest of time. It's in the report, and if anyone wants to know more, please email me. We spoke to 43 women, and just to say it's all adult women. Everyone that we spoke with is over 18. And I just want to say thank you to the Nelson Trust, not only because they recruited Sriracha as the peer researcher, and it's been absolutely invaluable having her on the project, but they also welcomed us into their women's centres and facilitated all the access to the women that participated in this research. And also just a thank you to all the practitioners and especially to the women who gave their time and took part in this research. So what effective treatment and recovery means for women, it was repeatedly discussed how recovery is going to be different for everyone and how this is likely then going to shape their treatment choices. However, regardless of whether women were working towards kind of more abstinence-based or harm reduction substance use recovery goals, recovery in general kind of equated to them feeling better about themselves, having an improved well-being, having more control, and ultimately being able to lead more fulfilling lives. And it was really important for women to have choice and agency in what recovery and treatment meant for them. And because of this, the idea that treatment would be different for different individuals came out really strongly. However, there were 6 overarching characteristics. One is that it's holistic and that it's able to respond to a range of women's physical, emotional, psychological, social, and practical needs. 2 is that it's compassionate and it respects their dignity and agency. Compassionate is a word that the women themselves use like repeatedly, and it's not necessarily that they wanted sympathy. In fact, they really didn't want sympathy. They just wanted practitioners and others to respond to their needs and experiences in a way that showed kind of understanding, kindness, and not judge, like without judgment. And it was really common for women to speak about how having practitioners see them as, for the women that they are, for the people that they are, rather than as addicts, help them to see themselves through a similar lens. And then number 3, it's person-centered and non-coercive, and this links to the principle that women should be able to define what treatment and recovery mean for them, and to be able to work towards it in their own time without the threat of scrutiny or punitive measures, such as having their script access stopped because they've missed appointments. And it was widely felt that motivation to engage with treatment or to receive support, or even just wanting things to change, was something that really needed to come from within the individual, and that forcing it on someone was likely to be ineffective. Number 4 is that it addresses the root causes of women's substance use problems, and women tended to perceive that their own problems with substance use was an indicator of kind of underlying issues or as a way of self-medicating for unmet needs. Therefore, for women to be able to achieve their recovery goals, whatever they may be, it was really stressed that treatment needed to support women to work through these drivers, such as kind of past traumatic experiences, mental health issues, or chronic pain. Number 5 is that it's trauma responsive, which means kind of embedding an understanding of trauma, of shame, and its effects throughout an entire organisation. So it's not just about understanding that someone is likely to have experienced trauma, but it's how this has then impacted their behaviours and how they perceive things, so that services are better able to respond to this. So this would mean kind of not labeling women as aggressive or as difficult, or recognizing that when women withdraw or go quiet from support, that's actually maybe when they need support the most. And this should be met with kind of increased and varied efforts to make contact rather than discharging them. And lastly, effective treatment builds strength and resilience. And a key goal of treatment was seen as kind of empowering women with the strength, resilience, and self assurance to continue their recovery in a world that had caused them harm. And again, regardless of recovery goals, recovery was seen as kind of a long term, continuous journey. And women really wanted treatment to set them up for this by, promoting their agency, improving their self worth, their self confidence, and providing them with the new skills and ways of coping. And then looking at what women's journeys through treatment should look like. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail today. So I'll just pick out the key things, and that is that women really wanted to be able to access gender and trauma responsive treatment throughout a range of different referral pathways, as well as having self-referral and outreach options. And a key point around this that was emphasised repeatedly was the need for fast access to appointments off the back of referrals. And women kind of reflected, when they had to wait months for that first appointment, their circumstances had changed, their headspace had changed, and often they were no longer in a place where they were kind of open or wanting to receive support. Then once women were in treatment, they wanted to move through as a phased approach, or as a step ladder, as some of the women described it, which you can kind of see here on the slides. This phased approach tended to reflect Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in kind of addressing immediate needs such as safety and stabilisation first, before addressing higher level needs, so that the women felt that they had capacity to engage effectively. And women kind of spoke about how previously, when they had tried to work through maybe past traumas too soon, or in inappropriate settings, this has had quite negative impacts on them. The kind of general perception was that at best, doing this too soon was ineffective, and at worst, it caused women kind of further harm, and it led them to revert back to kind of past behaviours that they were maybe trying to move away from. And then all the way through to kind of ending treatment. Again, a key bit around this was kind of those anxieties of treatment ending. So women really wanted a gradual kind of tapering of support to avoid that kind of cliff edge, where all support kind of stops at once. And then having a single comprehensive assessment process, support planning for relapse, and connecting women with ongoing recovery support for after treatment had ended were all emphasised as really key points across these different phases. And then for delivering effective treatment, women described a number of practical elements that were seen as essential, which we've grouped into these 6 components here. There's much more detail in the report, so again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to probably pick out a couple bits. For tailoring support to individuals, women reflected on the importance of services being able to support them in ways that considered their personal circumstances and their identity, but without stigmatising or stereotyping. Women of colour that we spoke with recounted kind of being exploited or discriminated against by services, either from the staff themselves or by other clients. And in these instances, it's quite common for harmful behaviour or language to go unchallenged. And because of this, some women suggested that there needed to be more training for practitioners, not only around anti-racism, but also to equip them with the tools and with the confidence to address and kind of call out this discriminatory behaviour. And then also some women suggested that having more practitioners from kind of racially minoritized communities who understood cultural nuances without women having to over-explain themselves, was also discussed as being really needed. And then for multi-agency care, women stressed that having numerous appointments with multiple different services, often at different points in town, and these services weren't communicating with each other, and women really felt that this was kind of setting them up to fail. So instead, they ideally wanted services to all be in the same place and have their meetings all together. And when this wasn't possible, then information sharing between relevant services was absolutely crucial. Women discussed maybe putting all the kind of relevant practitioners from different services into an email chain so they could all be updated, or kind of working from a shared client document or shared case management platform. And mental health, housing and children's services were seen as particularly important because of the role that they have in women's recovery. However, they were also the ones that were kind of the most women found the most difficult to engage with. And I think this really highlighted the need for that more coordinated approach. So effective treatment for women that we spoke with kind of meant a system that could address not only the causes and drivers of their substance use problems, but also help them manage their use long term in a way that reflected their own recovery goals, and also support their wider needs. And this can be best achieved through a joined up system where support is understood through the lens of kind of gender and trauma responsiveness, kind of starting with women and their needs and then building the services and systems of care around them. And whole systems approaches where all services with a role in supporting women work in partnership and are all integrated into a cohesive system of care represents an alternative model that could more effectively address women's needs. An example of this could be delivering treatment and other relevant support provisions from within a women's community service, where support is already gender and trauma responsive, such as a women's centre. Chris is going to speak more about this, so I won't say much other than just say that, given the extensive experience and expertise that women's centres have in supporting women, they are well placed to deliver women's treatment and wider support provision, either through, co-location or co-commissioning arrangements. And then we also know that women who are more marginalised by society, can face additional barriers to accessing treatment and support, including from some women's services. Grassroots organisations can provide a really vital safety net for women who are more likely to kind of fall through those gaps of support, and they provide a really effective add-on support to other services. Grassroots are better placed to maybe understand and respond to the impacts of discrimination on women's lives, as well as kind of address their trauma and their substance use. And so involving grassroots organisations in whole systems approaches and partnerships can really help to overcome these barriers. However, standard commissioning processes often disadvantage smaller grassroots organisations, particularly when they're competing with larger services who maybe have greater organisational capacity or resources. Grant funding can remove these barriers for smaller organisations, but it would need to be provided on a full cost recovery basis, and ideally secured for several years. And then also for other services that are looking to partner with grassroots organisations, it's important that these partnerships are equitable, as often grassroots organisations maybe are inadequately paid or they're not paid at all. So this then brings us to the recommendations, and whole systems approaches to supporting women can contribute to a range of kind of central government missions, including reducing health inequalities, halving violence against women and girls, and decreasing the number of women in custody. And while these approaches need to be driven by local areas, central government can play a key role in kind of removing some of the obstacles and encouraging innovation. And they can do this by prioritising women with unmet needs as a distinct population, and as part of this, setting really clear priorities for improving their outcomes through cross-departmental collaboration. As part of this, they can expand their working definition of trauma-informed practice to include principles of trauma-responsive care for women with multiple and unmet needs, and accompany this with practical guidance and quality standards. Central government can also develop standards for better kind of gender and ethnicity collection data so that we can understand needs more comprehensively. They can also promote whole systems approaches by providing long-term cross-departmental investment for integrated approaches, as well as having that additional funding for grassroots organisations. And as part of this, they can expand the use of ring-fenced treatment funding to encompass the full range of women's treatment needs. And they can treat substance use as a chronic health condition, so as to address physical and mental health needs simultaneously. And lastly, they can require local combating drugs partnerships to establish women's strategic groups. And then for local authorities, they can implement integrated place-based approaches and support delivery partnerships through coordinated planning and co-commissioning. And for this, local authorities should develop a comprehensive understanding of women's needs, really importantly, including those that aren't currently accessing treatment or support. And they can do this by utilising a range of data sets, as well as working with women themselves and engaging with women's centres and grassroots organisations. And then from this, they can set clear aims for, again, multi-agency improved outcomes. And then through place-based approaches, local authorities can integrate funding streams to facilitate collaboration, reduce duplication, and ensure adequate funding for women's treatment and recovery. Further to this, commissioners can integrate treatment with wider support by adopting no wrong door policies. They can explore options for co-commissioning women's centres and grassroots organisations, and they can work with health agencies such as ITBs to develop joint strategies that integrate women's health support, and embed a range of psychological therapies as a standard component of treatment interventions. They can establish a women's strategic group within local combating drugs partnerships, and they can implement standards for information sharing, taking learning from kind of existing models of dynamic information sharing and case management, such as, family drug and alcohol courts. And for service providers, women deserve access to safe, appropriate, and effective treatment that supports them through kind of holistic, gender and trauma responsive ways. And we, understand the constraints that a lot of services are under and the kind of lack of resources. So this can be achieved through collaborative partnerships. And as such, we're recommending that services deliver treatment as part of a wider package of support, establishing equitable partnerships with women's centres and grassroots organisations as a way of achieving this. This wider package of support should also include personal development opportunities, offering education, employment, and peer connections, as well as adopting responsive approaches, such as offering options for out-of-hours support. Services should also provide women with information if immediate access to support is not possible, such as if there are wait lists for them to be able to get that first appointment. And services need to listen to women and give them autonomy to define what treatment and recovery means for them and to set their own recovery goals. And then as part of committing to gender and trauma responsive care, services should embed an understanding of trauma throughout the entire organisation, making every effort not to discharge women if they go quiet or withdraw from support. Personalised care plans should be co-created with the women themselves and should address the full range of their needs, including relapse support. And lastly, services need to offer adequate training, support and ongoing supervision for women serving as peer mentors or other roles, ensuring that they have rapid access to care if needed. Thank you. I will hand back to Vicky.
Thank you so much, Lydia. That was really, and I know, whistle-stop tour through what was a big piece of work that you and Sue in particular have been working on. I know Miranda has put a link to the full report in the chat there as well, and I can already see that people are posting some really interesting questions in the Q&A. So please do keep that up, and we will come to some of those, and then others we'll kind of circulate around at the end as well, please. Thank you. So now we are going to, I think Miranda is going to be setting up because we're going to hear from Sue. And Sue was our peer researcher. Sue actually was the peer researcher on this project and has produced a video for us to talk about that.
My name is Sarakshi Jainal and I'm the peer researcher of this project. I took on this role because it really firstly stood out to me. I've had my own mental health experiences within the system, and when I was approached for this project, I felt like this was a really good opportunity to talk about my own experiences and be able to voice a lot of the experiences of being a service user. And I've wanted to honour the women as well as my own experiences during this project, and I wanted to keep the women the forefront because they've opened up about very personal things about their life. And as service user, I know when you have to talk about these things, it's not easy. So I really wanted to recognise their experiences in this report, in this research, and to make sure they have that voice. It took me a very, very long time to settle into groups, especially in mixed gendered kind of services where I have my own traumas. And I know this was another theme present in the research where women just did not feel comfortable being in mixed gendered groups for whatever reason that was. And it actually depleted their recovery, and it actually brought them quite a few steps back unintentionally. And I could really resonate with that, because there has been moments where I've had to go into a group because I don't have a choice. Where else am I meant to go? It doesn't just impact specific demographics, it impacts everyone. But the reason why you don't see us is because there isn't us. We're not. If we don't have someone who's an ethnic key worker, then it's not easy for us to want to go, because there's so many barriers to that on its own. Where if I tell you about my personal struggles with my culture, to someone who doesn't understand that, then it is a barrier. We feel like there's no point. Why would I want to tell this person about my story? They're just not going to understand. They're going to expect me to do this, but they don't truly understand that. Like, it literally just, you have to put people like us in these systems to feel comfortable enough. And if people don't see people like us, then it is like I can't open up to them because they're not going to understand. So I think that's the very basic thing, and not as a tick box thing. On a more, yes, we know that there are people who need support. This specific demographic is not reaching out, and it's not because they don't have these issues, because that is not the case. It's just that we don't feel comfortable enough to seek out for help if we know that there isn't someone on the other side that will actually understand. I always felt very strongly that there has to be more for relapse prevention. You can't simply rely on CAAANA, and this is not to say that they're not doing it. Like, they are fantastic. I know so many people personally that have found it kind of life-changing, and it's probably saved their life. But personally, for me, it just didn't work, and that's why I'm so passionate about having to implement loads of options for relapse prevention. Not one, like, we're all different. My relapse is completely different to another person's relapse. My triggers are different to someone else's triggers, and this has been a key theme again in this project and the research, where women talk about these things, and though the themes are same, but everyone's experiences are so different, and that is what makes us unique, and that is also why we need person-centered approaches. We need to make sure that it is a person by person support system, not a generalized, okay, you need to be sober, you need to be abstinent, and then we will give you the support. Understandably, not just kind of drug and alcohol services, any service, any, is so stretched that they have to make sure that there's high turnover and they're meeting the client demands, etc., whatever they need to do, quotas, whatever it is. But we also need to ensure that we're honoring the client. We need to remember that for them to even reach out, for them to admit to firstly themselves is a really difficult position. No one wants to sit with that pain and that realization and then have to do the work. And we need very basic things, and that is empathy, validation, accountability, yes, but that has to come with so much compassion, and that compassion then becomes self-compassion and self-validation. And when we are provided that in these environments where we are seeking support, it actually helps rebuild within ourselves, that we're like, we are worthy to seek help, we are worthy to take up space, we are worthy to utilize the services around us. There has to be choice when we as humans access support, we need help. Firstly, it's not easy, and then we're then expected to integrate into a system when the system should be integrated into us, and we're not given a choice. So there has to be autonomy, there has to be empathy, and there has to be validation. And these are very basic things. This doesn't need funding, this doesn't need anything other than just a genuine want to help someone and actually hear their story and wanting to help them be successful in however their recovery is. And these are just a few of the core elements of recovery. I have been in recovery for some time myself, and without just these three components, I don't think I would be able to have engaged in this research.
I don't think I can see from the amount of emotions and the reactions that are coming through there from people that's been incredibly well received. So thank you so much, Saraksha. That was really informative, and I know that your contribution on this work has been so vital. So thank you. I'm going to now hand over to Christina, who's the CEO of the Nelson Trust, who is going to talk to us about their treatment services for women. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Vicky. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the Centre of Justice Innovation team, Sue, our peer researcher, the teams, and of course the women who spoke so freely of their experiences, all in the hope of being able to improve the system for other women. So today I will briefly be talking to you about the role of women's centres in treatment. But very, very quickly, I'll just give you a very brief introduction to the Nelson Trust. The Nelson Trust is a charity which specialises in gender responsive services, and that includes residential rehab and women's community centres across the South West and Wales. So we provide holistic care, working with substance use, addressing trauma, health, justice, and family needs, amongst others. And our mission is to support people to rebuild their lives and achieve sustainable recovery across the whole spectrum of interventions. Next slide, please. So why trauma-informed and gender responsive? And I'm aware this is a well-trodden path, but I wanted to give some context. So women who use substances often face unique challenges such as trauma, their mistrust in services and people, they're fearful, full of shame, and the stigma associated with accessing treatment because they are often primary caregivers. Support given to women must incorporate a sensitivity to and interventions for these needs to achieve effective treatment outcomes. Over 70% of women in addiction treatment have experienced physical or sexual abuse at some point in their lives. And for women using substances to medicate the symptoms of a trauma, a holistic approach is critical. Interventions must address both the push factors, which compel substance use, and the pull factors, which keep a woman trapped in that cycle. Women need a place that understands the whole story and can provide support for every element of her needs in one place. We don't heal wounds by saying they don't exist. When it comes to women experiencing substance use, the wound is often trauma. It's deep, it's painful, and it's often invisible. Substance use is often a symptom of deeper pain. And when we talk about women's treatment, we're talking about treating trauma, mental health, and a woman's best method at coping. Next slide, please. So what are women's centres? Well, they're specialist support services designed specifically for women who often face what we call multiple unmet needs, and that can include substance use, trauma, health challenges, domestic violence and abuse, exploitation, homelessness, and all of that often results in women being swept into the criminal justice system. Our women's centres offer a safe, women-only space where women can come along and get the support she needs with whatever she needs. The services are holistic and view the woman in the context of her whole life. What's going on with her housing, substance use, relationships? Is she safe? What's going on with her health, etc. So the centres deliver services under one roof, and that happens through co-location of specialist commissioned services and close multi-agency partnership working. We take a relational approach where time is dedicated to building that trusting relationship, really getting to know women and helping women to address critical needs. That often starts with one-to-one sessions as we build up the relationship, sometimes progressing on to group work, therapies, and building community capital through volunteering and education, and social capital through hobbies and interests and social events, such as pamper days at the women's centres, lunch clubs. Women's centres and specialist women's services have a vital role in substance use treatment. Their role includes prevention, harm reduction, treatment, ongoing care, and abstinence if that's appropriate. Next slide, please. So I really wanted to highlight a couple of examples of how we have combined expertise and how we work in partnership to deliver holistic women's treatment. Locally in Gloucestershire, we work in partnership with VIA, and in Wiltshire, Bristol and Baines, we also work in partnership with Turning Point. Now, both Turning Point and VIA bring significant expertise in supporting people who have experienced substance misuse, and Nelson Trust combine our specialism in trauma and gender responsive support for women. Together, we deliver a flexible women-focused service which truly meets the presenting and ongoing needs of women, and that aids access, engagement, and offers a range of treatment interventions and holistic support. So a typical criteria for women-centred support under this pathway would be a woman who experiences multiple unmet needs. So that might be trauma, has experienced sexual or physical abuse, has mental health, or is homeless, experiencing domestic abuse. Often we wrap that up into adverse childhood experiences of 6 or more, and have experience of social care. So they may have had a child removed or may be at risk of having a child removed on a child protection plan, and have a historic kind of non-engagement, so least likely to engage in mainstream services. And so through our service model, the most vulnerable women are supported by specialist practitioners, and we focus our resources where the need is greatest. These services look different depending on local needs and the geography, and we work in both rural and urban areas. Next slide, please. So the Nelson Trust have delivered residential services for men and women for over 40 years. And around about 20 years ago, we researched some themes we identified for women. This research highlighted female clients in mixed gender settings experienced disproportionately poorer outcomes. We also learned that the engagement phase for women needed to occur much earlier. And that is one of the reasons why the Nelson Trust opened its first women's centre in Gloucester in 2010. But in terms of outcomes, working in a women-centred way, year on year, we have seen increased engagement rates, and that includes the frequency and quality of engagement, and reduced dropout rates. Women reporting a reduced burden of having to go to numerous locations and repeating their story multiple times. Our spaces are designed to allow for safer disclosure of women's experiences, and providing on-site specialism, which ensures immediate support and effective safety planning. The partnership working, co-location and the disclosures made within women's centres significantly increase access to treatment. And this collaborative approach ensures that women receive the necessary support in a timely and efficient manner. And as a result, women feel much more empowered, leading to improved treatment outcomes. Our model is a truly flexible delivery model. In-reach, outreach, and rapid re-prescribing delivered by female key workers, which reduces barriers, such as having an on-site crash. Women are able to bring their children in, their child is looked after while they can go and get support. And we have seen reductions in survival patterns associated with men and mixed gender services, and we have been able to consider the wider needs of the whole family by providing interventions for the whole family system. So the final slide, how do we make the spectrum of recovery visible to women? When women face addiction, trauma, and instability, they need more than just treatment. They need services that truly understand the complexity of their lives. We now need to work together to develop local whole systems of recovery. And that's where women's centres and specialist women's services come in. Women's centres provide specialist interventions in gender-informed environments. Women's centres focus holistically right across the spectrum of recovery, as determined by the woman herself. We create safe environments where women can hear from what drives substance misuse, trauma, violence, and systemic inequality. So from a commissioning perspective, we would recommend that tenders include a specialist women's provision, which encourages prime providers to engage with their local embedded women's specialist colleagues to provide those services. And we've seen in areas that we work in, such as Gloucestershire, that has worked well. And locally, services should be looking at co-location arrangements in women's services, partnerships, sharing learning, and offering a women's only afternoon is often not a suitable alternative to a partnership with a women's centre. And just finally, the women we support deserve no less than the very best specialisms we have to offer, delivered in locations where women feel safe, by women who truly understand their needs. Thank you very much.
Chris, thank you. And thank you for kind of talking about all of the great work that you guys achieve in the Nelson Trust as well. So that was really helpful. So thank you so much. And I know we've got you for the Q&A as well. And so last but absolutely not least, I'm going to pass over to Emma Plant, who's going to talk about her work around connected spaces. Emma, over to you.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come on today and just share a little bit about what I do and my own personal story. So I'm a community engager for a lived experience recovery organisation called North Yorkshire Connected Spaces. So in 2023, Red Rose Recovery got a bid from North Yorkshire Council to come and support them to build more recovery in Harrogate and areas of North Yorkshire. At this point in my life, I was a year out of rehab. I'm a woman who's got my own lived experience and, battled with addiction and losing my children and my own trauma. So I was at a recovery group, and that's where I met up with now my boss, Peter Yarwood. He's the founder of Red Rose Recovery, and Helen, a lady called Helen. She was from the Public Health of North Yorkshire Council, and they mentioned that they wanted to build, get some workshops up and running and training. And I was like, yeah, I was definitely up for that. I was working in the tea rooms at the time, but I wanted to use my own lived experience to go out there and help and support other people that had been through addiction or were battling with addiction and trauma. So yeah, we started to meet up every week, and that year in September we launched as North Yorkshire Connected Spaces. So we've now got a lived experience recovery organisation over in Harrogate, and we've just launched over into North Allerton. You know, these last 2 years, in such a short space of time, we've been able to, you know, build a recovery community through activities and groups. We offer training with the support of Red Rose Recovery. So I got the first job role that came out, and I left my job at the tea rooms and became a community engager. And we do a lot of groups and activities out in the community, but I work with a lot of women as well that attend our groups, and come on the community cleanups, that are going through very similar things that I've been through myself. So I mean, I went back to my own town, you know, where my name was very stigmatized. People didn't know what to do with me back in the days. And I went away to South Wales to a rehab for 7 months. And then I came out of rehab back to my hometown with a completely different mindset, to fight for everything that I'd lost. My youngest boy was in foster care at the time. I left rehab home, you know, I was homeless. I was fighting a court case. I was on probation. And through all that, I was able to just keep going. You know, and it was because a couple of people believed in me. And, you know, that inspired me to keep putting one foot in front of another. I started to share my story out on social media. And I had a lot of women reaching out to me because of what I was going through. Today, I have my little boy. I won the court case and I got my boy out of foster care. I've got him back home with me now. So yeah, I work with a lot of ladies that are either going through a court case or have just lost their children and many other things. And for me, it empowers me because I'm able to relate to them and guide them the best I can, giving them that one-on-one support. And it's a real passion of mine, being able to do that. The good thing is we've got North Yorkshire Council have been absolutely amazing, and they're really keen for us to get the voice of the people with that lived and living experience implicated into the systems. We're working hard behind the scenes with, you know, my voice, as well as volunteers or members that come on the community cleanups with us, or we have boxing groups for free. And yeah, we've got so much going on, and we're passing them on, you know, to the mental health, the housing team. We're getting their voices implicated into the systems, so their voices are heard. So yeah, we've done lots of things and lots of works going on with our lived experience recovery organisation. I've done a podcast with Renew and shared my story. We've been invited, we got invited to the national conference in Birmingham last year, and we got up and talked about who we were and what we were doing. So yeah, just lots of amazing works going on, you know, in the community and behind the scenes, really. Lots of important work. And, you know, I think it's important that we get the voices of the people with the lived experience and people that are still going through it, you know, into them systems and embedded. I think that's it for me.
Emma, thank you so much. And again, really, really helpful to be able to get your insights. And thank you for sharing your kind of personal story as well, because that's hugely appreciated, and obviously really important work that you are doing. And congratulations on everything that you have achieved as well, because that's amazing. So thank you. Okay, so that is the end of all of our presentations. So I'm going to open up now to the Q&A, and I can see some people have been publishing that. So again, if you do have questions, you need to put those into the the Q&A, and then we can put those to our panel. With timing, I mean, I will try my very best, and I know our panel will, but I think it's unlikely we're going to get through all of the questions. But what we will do is collate some answers to those. I might work around kind of popularity on reactions to kind of go with the Q&A questions that are garnering the most interest, but we can gather responses to other questions and send those round with slides as well. So the very first question that came in was about how we move away from an abstinence only focus towards recognizing that long-term sustained recovery is a positive outcome. So how are we kind of moving away from abstinence only focus towards more of a, I guess, a harm reduction approach towards that. I don't know if there's anybody on the panel that particularly wants to volunteer for that one. Lydia?
I can go first and just say a little bit, and then if anyone else wants to kind of add in on that, because I'll just go from what kind of came up in the research. And I think it's that kind of taking that public health approach often, rather than, kind of just focusing on abstinence. And by that, I mean, if we kind of think of substance use or kind of problems with substance use in the same way or as a health condition, similar to other kind of chronic health conditions, then it's more about kind of supporting that person to manage their symptoms, and substance use is maybe a symptom of the kind of underlying needs. So if we kind of reframe, or like not even reframe, but really focus treatment about kind of addressing those underlying needs and supporting those kind of wider needs that lead to someone's substance use, and making sure that they can lead fulfilling lives and are safe and able to have a bit more control over their substance use, that's maybe a better goal related, or like more kind of relating to other health conditions. You know, for example, like type 1 diabetes stays with someone forever, but through kind of lifestyle choices and other things, they can manage that safely. So it's like maybe just kind of taking a more public health approach to it. Anyway, that's what came up in the research, but I'll hand over to anyone else that wants to add to that.
Thank you. Dame Carol, I'm sure that this is a kind of something that you're used to talking about quite a lot within your work as well. Is there anything you wanted to add around the sort of moving away from a system that's abstinence only focused? Oh, sorry, Dame Carol, you're just on mute. Perfect.
I think we've been moving away ever since I did the review. What I encountered when I did the review were people who were at both ends of the spectrum, you know, trying to persuade me that one or the other was the best approach. But I would entirely agree with what Lydia said. It should be person-centered, and you should start with where the person is. And for me, if that person wants to enter, if you like, the system at the recovery end rather than going through formal treatment. You know, the idea has always been you must enter a treatment and go through. Actually, there are many ways of joining in and being part of a system that hopefully can help you wherever you are. And for me, it's trying to get people to believe we have a good enough system now, trying to develop it, whereby you can be helped at whatever stage you are at, rather than thinking you've got to formulate it on one end or the other, and to get those two communities of people who do have very strong views at either end to see that it isn't either or. I do think this government has the desire to take a more public health approach, and that is something that I sense, and that the government will, I think, in the autumn, lay out its own vision for drug and alcohol treatment and recovery. But I don't, and we're trying very hard to talk about addiction as a health condition. And as Lydia's just said, you know, if you've got diabetes, of course you want someone under perfect control. Of course you do, because otherwise they may lose their eyes or their kidneys. But you have to start where the person is and then try and enable them to move along the journey and to take them as far as they can go, is the way I see it as a person.
Thank you, Dame Carol. Chris, Emma, is there anything there from your services that you've kind of seen, and particularly Chris, and thinking you've obviously been involved in for such a time in those treatment services? Is that something that you've seen in your work?
I don't think I've got anything else to add on that one at the moment, Vicky, but I might mull it over and come back.
Sure, no problem. Okay, Lydia, so there is a question in here around how will the research findings and recommendations for women be communicated with local treatment agencies and then be implemented to benefit women in treatment?
Great question. So after this, and we're kind of launching the report, it's launched today, so we'll be able to share that around with everyone. And then after that, our plan is to do lots more kind of like localized presentations in groups and workshops. So we'll hopefully be having something in the kind of southwest of England where a lot of this research was done, and engaging with not only treatment services but kind of local commissioners and other agencies. And it would be great to be able to do that kind of more wide reaching as well. And we'll also, be kind of working with hopefully some APPGs as well for that kind of like top down approach as well, so we can kind of get that shared. And I know a lot of the time those APPGs, especially kind of the drug and alcohol and justice one, lots of treatment providers attend those. So I think it's just trying to share the kind of key messages as far and widely as possible. And I think also kind of learning from areas where there is already really, they have kind of implemented that and where they have done that, and kind of learning how they were able to do that within kind of maybe some of the constraints that we see in terms of like resources and funding. But also just to say, if anyone on the call would like us to join some kind of forum or network meeting or anything, please do email me. My email's on the presentation that we'll share around afterwards. Because it's just about kind of getting the messaging out as far and wide as possible, I think, and really getting people talking and starting to kind of really embed those partnerships so that women can get that full kind of wraparound holistic support.
Vic, it might be worth remembering for us all to remember that in 2022, OHID, when it published the Commissioning Quality Standards for Alcohol and Drug Services, set out an expectation on local authorities that treatment services should offer, this is what the standards say, should offer tailored responses to underrepresented groups such as women. So it is actually in the Commissioning Quality Standards. So you don't have to fight that one. I mean, it is said from the centre to the local authorities, this is what we expect. So, I mean, as you say, it is whether or not they then are willing to embrace it. And some areas have. But what I told I was doing this today, and they've said they've got an active work stream looking into this issue and are going to consider the recommendations of the report. So that's what they said to me.
That's very helpful, thank you. And some of what you talked to there, Dame Carol, as well, kind of speaks to Fazila's question around the recovery and lived experience. I suppose we're talking about how it's often quite male heavy, so meaning that it's often those voices that really come through, and women, and especially those from minoritized communities, are not accessing services due to a lack of representation. And so actually that's certainly something you talked about in your presentation as well. And so Fazila's question, a difficult one, but is around how do we integrate access that is built as part of a strategic direction as opposed to kind of isolated and good work. And I don't know if people have some thoughts on that they want to share.
I think you just need to get people in the system. As long as you start bringing these people forward, then I just think it's just a start. You just need to get it started, I guess. That's just my that's my perspective.
Thanks, Sue.
I think
sorry, Dame Carol, do you want to go next? And then Emma, I'll come to you after that as well.
I just think a targeted approach at local authorities who have got the commissioning standard, quality standards, but also a targeted approach at the centre, because they are going to consider this report. And if in those areas of the country, there are not many, I know, but there are areas that do it well, nothing is as powerful as results to show that it does make a difference compared to what business as usual does. And I think in making the case will be so much stronger if you can say, well, with this, with women's centres, with a women's centred approach, this is the kind of result we can get, and it compares well to business as usual, because nothing speaks as loud as results, and the Treasury anyway doesn't look at anything that isn't result based.
Thank you. That's really helpful and sort of speaks a lot to what Jane Marriott's put in the chat, who is, I know, the service manager of the tax service, which includes the FDAC in Gloucestershire, and is saying there how she's got really powerful, hopeful stories around women. And again, some of those results. So I think it's about making sure that we can, like say, share and promote that work that's going on, isn't it? Emma.
I think what it's about us working together as well. Like, for myself, I go into lots of different meetings, and I'm able to be the voice for the women that I work with. But then now I'm slowly bringing them along so they can have their say and their voice. And I think with the partners, they've got to be keen to work alongside us as well. It's about doing it as a whole, as a collab, together. And we have like forums as well, which we invite partners and the community for everyone to have their voices heard.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Chris, you had your hand up a second ago, then it's come down, but did you want to add to that there?
Yeah, just kind of building what Emma said, it's around the partnerships, it's around using systems we've already got in place. And I know in the report that we kind of, it was recommended about using the combating drugs partnerships as, a place that you can have a local women's strategy. So I think it's building upon what we've already got.
Yeah. Thank you. And a really important comment in the Q&A here as well, which is saying not a question, but an important thought, and about how some of the smaller by and for and grassroots services that are working tirelessly to support women in their communities, and the importance of making sure that they have the ring-fenced funding and that security and sustainability of funding, which I know for larger women's centres is also an issue as well, but certainly for those much smaller, very specialist by and for services. So, I mean, we might be hopeful around spending review. I don't know, Dame Carol, if you have any insights around if you think that there will be more of what any of that funding might look like, or those conversations.
I think that the very strongest possible case has been put in. I've been very impressed by the cross-government working to make a very good case. You have to acknowledge that we didn't meet all the requirements given to us by government, and we can only be as good as local services. So the centre can only report the data it gets. And there were some very, not such good areas of the country where, in fact, the results were not much better than when I started, despite a big influx of money. And we just have to be honest about that. But I think what has been very hard to do is to change culture and attitude and to really get things up and running. So we do need, I think we need at least another 6 years of money to really bring about proper change. All I can say is I think the best possible case has been made to the Treasury, with enormous support from really people pretty high up in the departments that were relevant. Nobody could have tried harder to make the case. We just have to hope that the Treasury sees that this really does fulfill quite a few of the missions. And for sure, if we didn't get funding, then I'm afraid we'd so easily slip back to where we were pre-2019, because it is nowhere near secure enough yet to it's very much, I see it in its infancy, and a huge amount needs to be done. And it is a real problem in terms of safe streets, safe societies, etc., etc. You know, so shall we say I'm sort of quietly hopeful that that we will succeed. But you know, money is exceedingly tight at the moment, as you will know, and they will make choices. But let's be positive. What I know is very much admired in government is the fact that we've got a joint approach to this. 6 departments of state have put their backs into this issue to try and make it a proper cross-government working system. And I think we have sort of achieved that. And that is definitely respected centrally. In fact, it's the example that is used in Whitehall of how to build cross-government working. So
well, Dame
knows?
Carol, with 1 minute to go, I think that feels like a hopeful note for us to end on there as well. And who better to have that kind of insight into some of that as well. But yeah, we'll take that positivity, I think. And there, I want to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers for kind of so eloquently kind of talking about their expertise and giving up their time. The slides we will share, as well as I know there's a link to the report as well, and we haven't been able to get through all of the Q&A, but we will go through those and make sure that we respond to those when to all of those when we are going out to participants as well. So thank you all for your time and for your enthusiasm and involvement in this as well, and the amazing work that so many of you that are on this, I know, are doing. There's some questions around good examples locally, and it'd be really great to be able to kind of build some of those together and share those out as well. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons. Hopefully some sunshine where you are. Take care all. Thank you. Bye.